we are like on a primal level tribal, and we want to be part of these tribes, and it's a survival threat if we're not part of the tribe.
Your diet and your lifestyle being healthy is bringing good energy to everywhere you go.
What's really changed in my perspective of even what does it mean to be a healthcare practitioner, or what does it mean to be a doctor? We think it's about waiting for people to get diseases.
A couple of medical terms is already overwhelming. And I think that's also your gift, right? That you're able to reach the masses and you're able to reach with your message.
Figuring out what's going on here. And then when you start going down that path, like it's really quite simple. All of those different pathways, but instead it was haphazard. And it was like, yeah, she lifted a couple days a week, low weights with God, you know? And so.
And also everything is a reflection of your inside world. So if you're depleting yourself as a person, why would you not expect it?
Hi, my name is Aggie and this is Biohacking Bestie. The one-stop shop for a modern queen, where you can find biohacking courses, self-growth courses, and where you can find the most incredible community of women so you can hit all of your biohacking goals and beyond.
All right, besties, I am going to be so uncool and basically fangirl really hard because Casey Means is someone I've been dying to have on the show, and we're finally doing it. #1 New York Times bestselling author of Good Energy, which we have right here. Yay. And I'm going to start with an embarrassing story because we met at a sort of like a women's circle, which was organized by our friend Sarah. And she basically, which is a great idea. So she was like, anyone who has a big ask that they're working on or dreaming on, raise your hand and ask other women to support you. And you said like, oh, I'm writing a book, which is coming out later in the year. And anyone has any suggestions? So I feel so embarrassed because I'm like, well, I did. I'm more than happy to like help you. Little did I know that I was just talking to the future New York Times bestselling author, went to the Congress, spoke on Joe Rogan, and here you are today. So I just feel like, oh. But I appreciate it because you're so humble and you don't ever make people feel like you're better than them and that anyone is better than them. And that's something that I absolutely adore about you.
Oh,
you're just so real.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel it's so funny because I feel the exact same way about you. I'm just like, I've been following your Instagram forever. I love your book. It accompanied me on so many hikes this year on Audible.
Which is crazy.
Voice.
I'm like, wait, a doctor would listen to my book.
Of course. Oh my gosh. It's amazing. I mean, I'm literally like implementing some of your tips. Absolutely. And so it just is so exciting I feel the exact same way, and I'm so happy to chat.
Why do you think that is, that sometimes it gets a little cliquey in the medical world, and somehow you came in as as someone who's been on both sides, on the dark side of the moon, and then kind of just had the aha moment of like, wait, I want to help people heal, and then you kind of bring everyone together. Like I see like a vision of you as like a beautiful like mother, like not like beautiful like strong feminine energy of like, okay, everyone sit down, we need to fix it. Not time to like play the different games about parties and you're a doctor and you're this and you're that. We all in this together, and that's how I see you, and this is like so special.
Thank you so much. You know, it's so interesting. Like I haven't really ever thought about that exact question. I love that question. I think part of maybe why I'm like, this is a crazy answer, but like I was very overweight as a child. Like really? I was 215 pounds when I was like in 7th grade. And so and unfortunately that in this culture means that you're sometimes more of like an outsider. And I had a lot of self-esteem because of my parents, and they were so loving and always made me feel beautiful. But like being really overweight as a child is hard. And I think actually as a very young child, I became obsessed with like including everyone because I was not included all the time. And it's like, I'm so grateful for that experience because it helped me sort of see like how meaningful it is when someone like, if someone's on the outside of a circle of kids talking, just like pull them in, it like can change everything. And when, and
it makes me want to cry because it's so true. I was like, I never fit. And, I was a bigger kid. People say like, oh, you weren't. Like in Poland, the Polish kids were skinny. If you were a little bigger, you're already fat. Like that's what they called you. And somehow I wasn't cool. And I think that just what makes us different. Yeah. So like it wasn't even about the weight. It was just like that I never felt like I'm too mainstream. And it's really hard when you feel like you don't belong, right? But it helps you like really build a beautiful relationship with yourself, right?
Totally, totally. And just to realize, like, I think also it was so interesting because I actually lost all the weight when I was like 15 years old. I became obsessed with health and I lost in a really healthy way. I literally went to the library and checked out books about nutrition. And I told my parents I'm going to cook for like 6 months. And I cooked all my own food and I joined a local gym as a teenager and I lost the weight. And then everyone treated me so differently. And it was such a crazy experience for me as a child because I was like, I'm the same person. I'm exactly the same person. And 6 months of just losing a little bit of weight, I mean, it was like 50 pounds, but people treated me completely differently. And that solidified in me just basically like how ridiculous kind of culture is around values and that just, you know, how important it is to see people for who they are and not just like what they look like. And I do think that puts something inside of me of like always wanting to bring people together as opposed to separate people. Because when you grow up and you're not a part of like the cliques, it really helps you realize like how toxic that type of environment can be. But we do live in we are tribal, you know, species. And I think that part of the reason why the healthcare conversation becomes so divisive is because we are like on a primal level tribal and we want to be part of these tribes. And it's a survival threat if we're not part of the tribe. And I think especially in healthcare, when you've got this group of very smart people who have given up, you know, just for the case of MDs, but this applies to any type of practitioner, like DOs, PAs, NPs, chiropractors, RNs, dietitians, anyone. You're devoting years of your life and tons of money to learn something. You are usually doing it for really good reasons. You don't necessarily know what you're learning and what you're not learning. Like you don't really realize at the time how myopic the view you're getting on the world is. And then you'd spend all this time in the clinics working and sacrificing a lot of your personal life for this job that's very noble. And all of a sudden you're in like your late 20s or early 30s and you're so much of who you are and what your identity is this job. And that makes it even harder to break away and question it because you're like, I've devoted so much time, money, and personal life to this thing. How could I possibly question it at this point? And so people don't question it because it's hard. And then on top of that, they add all these other layers. Like you might be subject to litigation if you step outside the dogma and the doctrine of your field, if you practice outside the guidelines. And also you might be subject to just general ridicule, like you're pseudoscience or you aren't evidence-based or you're a quack. These are all things that friends of ours, you know, have been like the best functional medicine doctors in the world have been called this, no matter how many academic credentials they have. And so it's a really kind of just funny, polarized, tribalistic time right now in healthcare where it's like you're either giving your kids 72 vaccinations or you're anti-vax. Like that's ridiculous. You know, like that's not the way it is.
And it's so quick for people to cancel you.
And so I think part of like how we're going to get our way out of this and move towards like just coming together to solve the problems. Like right now, 50% of children are chronically ill. And over the age of 55, 75% of people have a chronic illness. Almost all these chronic illnesses are preventable. We have huge problems in the US that are going to be existential for the future of this country and whether we're able to continue to be competitive. I mean, this country is only a few hundred years old. It's not a given that we're going to continue being a strong country if our population is so sick. We actually must come together to solve these issues. And part of that is going to be kind of having some humility, I think, about our training and what we've learned and what tribes we're a part of and working together to solve these existential issues. Why are kids so sick? You know, why are people losing their minds at age 50, 60 with early onset dementia? We have to put love of our health and love of, you know, our country, but also global health and love of our children above all of these polarizing, divisive differences and not be so quick to label people with these black and white labels that are totally meaningless and are more for like accumulating power rather than actually solving problems.
Yeah, and I think the best testament to actually your diet and your lifestyle being healthy is bringing good energy to everywhere you go, which I think it's very true. I find that it's really interesting when people think they're healthy, but they're quite toxic. And this is like a level that no one really talks about. Like if you're healthy, but you're competitive and mean and, you know, disrespectful, I'm like, I don't know if your diet's good.
This is such an interesting point. I think about this a lot too, because you see people who are railing about health and about how important it is for us to eat a certain very specific way or take these specific medications, and like they're screaming at you and they aren't healthy. They aren't acting healthy. And it's like, I can't presume to know what's going on with their health, but this does not seem like everything's working, to me, I feel that the ultimate biomarker that we should be focusing on is, do we wake up every single morning with a sense of joy and a sense of limitless potential, a sense of optimism for the day and for our future, a sense of internal power to take on the challenges of the day and to really like rock this incredible day in our short, precious lives? We should, I think, all be waking up like that most days. And of course, sometimes in my late luteal phase, I don't feel exactly that way, but a lot of days. And I think many of us aren't waking up that way.
I just don't like the definition of health in the Western world, because if you talk to, people from the East, whether it's in Ayurveda or Chinese medicine, it's like, it's not the absence of disease. So a lot of people say like, I'm healthy, but they have acne, they're depressed. They're like, oh, I just take a thyroid medication, but like, I don't, I still have 4 limbs, so I'm technically healthy. And it's just that definition of healthy where you're not bedridden. That's what it feels like in the Western world, right? I'm not in a hospital, I'm not bedridden. For me, like health has almost like no upper limit. The healthier I get, the better I feel. And I'm like, wow, this is just like unlocks a new level of awareness, of spirituality, of intelligence in a way, because the brain fog lifts and all of a sudden I can ask myself questions that I wasn't able to ask before. It's hard to explain to someone who's not feeling well. It's almost like we're on a drug that's called health, and it's like you really have to try it to know there's like the glass ceiling that people hit in their health.
I mean, I've been depressed. I've had clinical depression and anxiety when I was a surgical resident, and I was sleeping only about 4 nights per week, and the other 3 nights a week I was on call, and I was only sleeping part of the night, and then I'd sleep during the day the next day, and I was eating cafeteria food, and I was never going outside, and I wasn't working out, and I was eating all cafeteria food. Like obviously that will create problems. And so during that time, this type of conversation, I don't know if it would have had any impact on me, because I was so unmotivated and depressed that I actually, I had a very close girlfriend whose bachelorette party was one of the weekends in residency, and I was actually off that weekend, and I was so depressed that I not only did not show up for the bachelorette party, I did not even call or text her to tell her that I couldn't come. So that level of depletion where you can't even pick up the phone. And so this type of idea, that it could just be transcendent and wonderful, it wouldn't have really landed.
Yeah, well, that's
My
what
brain
I mean.
was different. But then I kind of hit rock bottom. And what actually happened was that I developed severe chronic neck pain. And I thought it was all due to the fact that I was a surgery resident and I was looking down in the operating room all day. I thought it was more of an ergonomic injury. But then I read John Sarno's book, Healing Back Pain, which is all about the psychosomatic causes of back pain. And I realized something about that woke me up. And I actually walked into my department chair's office and I said, then you never do this as a resident. I said, I'm taking 3 months off or I'm quitting. I need to go heal what's going on in my neck. I can't, it was debilitating. My hand was numb. It was so, I was like, what if I'm not able to lift my baby? This is getting ridiculous. The John Sarno book empowered me, and I took 3 months off, and they let me do that, which was nice. But the second I had my life back, I was eating real food. I was sleeping as much as I needed to. I was walking every day. I was in the sunlight. My depression lifted in 6 weeks, and I was completely back to living in full color. I remember telling my parents, I feel like I'm living in black and white.
I just love
you
and your dress and everything.
It was so dark. And that is what really evangelized me and radicalized me about kind of this more functional medicine route, because I saw it in my own self. But what's really changed in my perspective of even what does it mean to be a healthcare practitioner, or what does it mean to be a doctor? We think it's about waiting for people to get diseases and then reaching to our toolbox of drugs and surgery to play whack-a-mole with whatever symptom they come in with. It's very algorithmic. It's very reactive. But I think about now, with the perspective I have now, is what if doctors saw themselves more in almost like a traditional sense of a healer, where we are helping to essentially educate and inspire people to be their own healers, to help them work with the beautiful environment around them to coax healing in their own bodies. And that our true purpose as doctors is to unlock such vibrant health and connection, harmonious connection with environmental factors like food and sunlight, that people can actually reach their highest purpose and actually get to that third eye, crown chakra, reach their highest purpose, which is going to be much more difficult, I believe, for people if you are mired in metabolic dysfunction, depression, anxiety. But how empowering for healthcare practitioners to see their role as something different than what we've been told it is, which is to play aggressive whack-a-mole with symptoms rather than helping people cultivate really the functionality within their material body so that they can have the capacity to connect with their highest purpose. And, you know, for people who believe in this sense, their spirituality and their connection with God.
It's funny because it's the reason why I even got into health and wellness in the first place. My biggest dream was to always be a coach, and I feel like this is my gift. Like I show people that just go for more. Like that's just like I had this insatiable carriage. I sailed across the Pacific, you know, I skydived. Like I always did those things, and it was just like it's so easy. And I couldn't really relate to people that didn't do those things. I was like, oh my God, like you just have to go for it. You just have to believe it. And the more I started working with people, it was a very humbling experience because I realized that if people's biology is off and they feel terrible when they wake up and they're on coffees and they feel tired but wired, it's really hard to make a change. It feels overwhelming. I didn't see that until I got really sick, had all these issues, couldn't get out of bed for 6 months. And I was like, oh, so all that like inspirational talk that I was giving people wasn't even working for me. Kind of like the same thing. And I was like, ouch. Like, so I believe that mindset can override biology, but it's much easier to start with biology, right? And have that, like, I believe mind over matter. Like, I do believe the power of placebo, and like, but I just don't think most people are there yet. And it would be much, much easier to start with a healthier body, or at least one that isn't constantly struggling, and then go after your dreams. And I think it's especially beautiful that I finally have a woman in this space I look up to so much, because it just brings a very different, beautiful energy. And I want more women to do more things with their lives that is beyond just having an okay career. Like women just give up on themselves so quickly, and then they get a family and they think it's like, that's it. Yeah, we can have it all, you know, and we don't have to if we don't want to. And it's okay for you to, like, if you want to focus on kids for 2, 5, 7 years, but like have things that also set your soul on fire.
No, I mean, I think so much of why we're sick in this country is in part because women have forgotten, and I think they've forgotten because of intentional forces that are trying to get us to forget, like, the power of what it means to be a woman, which is to be a life creator. And we have decided in this country that quarterly profits are essentially, that is the religion of our country, is economic growth. And because of that, we're willing to basically cut any corners in our industry and culture to eke out short-term efficiency over a pursuit of long-term respect of life. And we see this with what we've told women, which is basically like, just keep, you know, grinding, and, you know, you're going to work, and you're going to get all this higher education, and you need to have a baby, and you need to breastfeed the baby for 2 years, which is what the AAP literally says for women to do. And we're not going to have any national support. Eke out as much productivity and work from these life-giving things. We've done the same thing to soil. We've said with industrial agriculture, we can eke out a tiny bit more, little bit more quarterly profit by squeezing the soil in this totally unnatural way. We're going to do monocrop agriculture. We're going to do invasive tilling. We're going to use synthetic pesticides. We're going to use fossil fuel-derived synthetic fertilizers when we basically get rid of all the nutrients from the soil from overusing it. We're going to say it's endless summer and 12 months a year instead of having natural cycles and yin and yang. So we've said, okay, we have this hubris to say we are smarter than nature. So we are going to outsmart the things in culture in the world that give us life, soil, and women, to get as much quarterly productivity out of them. And then we're surprised when civilization is crumbling.
And women are infertile.
Women are infertile. Women are depressed. Children are very, very sick and depressed. We are seeing women having 2-to-1 rates of Alzheimer's dementia postmenopausally. Women are losing their minds. Some people estimate only about 40 harvests left for our soil. Our soil and our agriculture system is incredibly fragile. And I truly do think that the way out of this mess, part of it is helping to get back on that spiritual level to understanding what life is and how life is cultivated, which is cyclicality. It is respecting that you have to have yang periods like summer and like ovulation, and you have to have yin periods like menstruation and winter. And you don't actually get sustainable life if you don't respect yin and yang. But the real funny thing is that because of our hubris, we've thought that yin periods are subproductive. So we're trying to basically get rid of yin. What we don't realize is we actually don't get the yang if we don't have the yin. So I think the onus is,
it's just like that, the black and white sign of yin and yang.
The yin yang. We're only focusing on one side of that, but you can't actually get that. You can't get sustainable productivity if you don't respect the rest periods. And
I resonate so much. I just feel like we're being brainwashed that being has no value.
Being has no value, even though it's what is required to actually have any life-giving thing create life sustainably. And I think the onus is not on men or government to actually convince people of this, because I don't think that's going to happen because it goes against our whole economic model. I think the onus is actually on women to reconnect to our divine feminine and to stand in power about realizing the gift that I can give to the world is my intuition, my divine knowing, my life-giving potential, my magical creativity, which of course can have business purposes and starting companies, but it also is about creativity, and creating life is part and parcel with respecting yin and respecting the yang. And we have to take ownership for that so we don't feel guilty for our rest. And when we stand in that power, other people will respect it. It's when we're confused about that people take advantage. So I actually don't think, it's not the patriarchy, it's not culture. I actually put the onus on women for letting people tell us that we are just these, profit center workhorses, and that's our value. I think it's going to be women who need to. I have so many girlfriends who are going through the motherhood journey and this and that, and they won't rest. They won't, because they're so bought into their value coming from what culture is saying, productivity. And it's like, oh, and then my husband doesn't, respect it. And it's like, you need to own it. We have to own it first for ourselves before other people are going to respect it. And that means going on the divine feminine journey, which is long and arduous and hard to reclaim that. And it's the best journey I think any woman can go on, but it's our responsibility.
And just as you thought you can love Casey more, she just drops another truth bomb and another layer. You're like a beautiful cake of just because this is what you're saying is extremely profound, because it's so easy to be like, oh, it's the patriarchy, it's the government, and people get so quick to cancel each other and to blame each other. And now they don't speak to you because you're supporting one party or another, as if you can only speak to people that fully align with your political views or your point of view or even your dietary preferences. It's just so funny because at the end of the day, as long as you eat real food, I'm not even too married to a specific diet. Of course, I have my own preference, but I think Eastern medicines understood it so much better. What's your body composition? Do you have more heat? Do you have more cold? What's going to work for me? It's not going to work for you. As long as it's real food, you have this, which you mentioned in the book, the bio-individuality, that it's not really just a cookie cutter, everyone eats this and that. But if we feed us from soils that are, completely depleted from chi, of life force, there's nothing there. And we eat the food that's has no life force. And then we as women are giving life out of an already empty cup, and there's very little life force in us. And so it just feels like we're dying before we're actually dead, right? That we just become these zombies. And I love that in Chinese medicine, it's all about the life force and the energy and the yin and the yang. Which one do you need, right? Some people need more warmth, some people need more cold. And I'm like, they had to figure it out 5,000 years ago. How arrogant do you need to be to not even tune in? It's well, someone's been figuring it out for 5,000 years. We've had this country for 300. How about we just maybe see what other people are doing just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I know. And it's you see how it then gets institutionalized and becomes part of culture. The Flexner Report, which was around 1910, which was basically paid for by Rockefeller, who was doing all this oil production and realized he could make pharmaceutical drugs out of byproducts of oil refining. He basically took his personal lawyer, whose last name was Flexner, to go around the US and essentially do these reports on every medical school. And what he did was he ended up writing the Flexner Report, which was adopted by Congress in about 1910, which essentially was the legal structure that almost demonized and criminalized holistic and natural medicine in favor of allopathic medicine, which is all about a intervention first model of disease management, of using drugs and surgery and invasive interventions to cut things out and to fix things. and basically required medical schools to move towards this allopathic, reactive, very much not a root cause approach to healthcare. And that's still how we're practicing today, over 100 years later. So you take these sort of financial motivations and what at the time could have been looked like as innovation, like drugs. And there were innovative, I mean, obviously like antibiotics and certain vaccines like had a strong impact on public health. But then it was like, okay, let's take this trust that we've built from these miraculous sort of acute interventions like antibiotics, and then we're going to tell everyone that this is the only way to practice medicine. And now, of course, we have tens of thousands of pharmaceutical medications, mostly for chronic illnesses, which are primarily lifestyle based. And as we prescribe more medications in the United States, the chronic disease rates are going up. I mean, how does that not make doctors scratch their head? The more medicine we prescribe, the sicker Americans are getting. Not saying that the medications are causing the sickness, but by ignoring the root cause in favor of reactive intervention-based approach, we are literally we are getting sicker as a country. And so I still scratch my head about this, is how there are doctors and healthcare practitioners working the system where every year just objective data is showing us that Americans are getting sicker and life expectancy is going down. And we're not stopping to ask why this is happening. And maybe the approach that we're implementing and spending $4.3 trillion on per year isn't exactly hitting the mark, because it's obviously not.
Yeah.
And yet instead of asking why, we're doubling down on the current approach. This is not a good strategy. So that's really the message I have for everyone, people and, individual lay people and doctors, is like, we have to slow down enough to ask why. But we're so distracted and we're so busy and we're trying to be so productive because that's our value system that we don't even stop for a minute to look around us and look at what's going on. Rome is burning and we're so dopamine addicted and distracted on the hustle culture to even stop and ask, why is our country's health absolutely going down the drain?
Like to think of myself as that someone who's trying to speak the language of the people that need to hear it the most, because there's so many incredible doctors and there's incredible research. You can literally go on PubMed and read so many studies, but at the end of the day, you realize that like you need to meet people where they're at. And a big part of my content is like, I want to simplify it. I don't want to, like, I had this when I first got into biohacking and read all